Hi everybody. Well, we made it to the end of the semester. In this mini lecture, I will give you a review of the topics and things you need to study for the final exam. There will be more material on that in the weekly plan, including questions and answers, more information about the format of the exam, and I will post at least one more additional mini lecture in terms of summarizing the course as a whole. But let's start right now with this review for the final exam. Now, while I'm calling it the final exam, it is not a cumulative exam that covers the entire course, but instead it's our second exam, so it is covering material from weeks 9 through 13. All right, so that's the first thing. In terms of date, the exam window, so the exam will be open on May 20 and May 21st for 48 hours. And like with the midterm exam, you will need to find time within those 48 hours, about 1.5 to 2 hours, to sit down, start the exam, and complete it. Just as before, once you start the exam, you need to complete it. You cannot just leave it and then come back later. I will send more reminders and information about the technicality of all this, but I think that will suffice for now. In terms of format, again, I will rely heavily on multiple choice, true and false, and perhaps a number of multiple answer questions, and some short answer question, meaning that there is a space for you to complete an open-end entry. So what material are we covering? So we are covering everything that has to do with political culture and socialization. It's right here in front of you, but all the material that you need is in week number 9 for this one. So there is a definition of what political culture is right here and how it is different in different countries. But unlike political ideologies that can divide us, political culture is the unifying aspects of people in the same political entity. So if we think about the American political culture, our belief in things like liberty and freedoms, individualism, equality of opportunity, our trust in democracy, our general distrust in government, and our strong belief in the rule of law and justice, all of those things unite most Americans, even if they are more conservative or more liberal on the ideological continuum. And then comes in this topic of political socialization, which is how we maintain the political culture, how we transfer it to the next generations and also to immigrants that come to our country, right? And this is how people learn about our political culture, our political system, what is important to Americans in general, and what is my role as a citizen within this system. And we talked about the importance of parents leading by example. We talked about how socialization is an ongoing process throughout life, but that your childhood experiences are very, very important. And other places where you can get that socialization through, aside from your family, through civic education in the schools, through your peer group, the media, professional organizations, social organizations such as religious institutions, and your life experience overall. The next topic, that general topic that's covered in the exam, is politics and economics. And again, I have a few points here on this slide, but to cover all the material, you need to go to week number 10, right? We had a discussion about how the economic goals of all governments are pretty much to grow the economy, to keep inflation and unemployment low, and to reduce inequalities, right? And then I want you to study the different ways that we talked about how can a government impact or pursue each of those different goals. We also talked in week number 10 about IPE, International Political Economy, and how governments can have different approaches to international political economy, such as a more nationalist approach, which uses a lot of tariffs and other trade barriers to protect the local economy or the domestic economy. And you can you can oppose that to a more liberal approach to international political economy, where you are relying much more on free trade and free movement of capital, and the work of international economic institutions such as the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, etc. We also mentioned only very quickly and very briefly the idea of a critical approach to international political economy that comes with neo-Marxism, where we talk about worldwide inequalities, the have versus the have-nots, the geopolitical north versus the geopolitical south, or focusing on other items such as the global environment and its economic impact. The next large topic that we cover, and again, few points here, but a lot more in week number 11, is international relations or international politics. I want you to understand the concept of anarchy in international relations, and remember that all we're talking about here is the lack of hierarchy, not about chaos. And that all that it means when we say there is an anarchic international system is that there is no world government. However, as we spoke, we do know that we have world governance or some governance institutions such as the UN, but what they do is coordinate the action between nation states and other actors. They are not fully hierarchically governing the process. Now, because we're talking about this anarchic international system, the way the world works a lot of time is by power politics. And we mentioned the concept of the levels of analysis, the individual, state, and system. And we talked about concepts such as the balance of power and the balance of threat. Also mentioned international relations theories such as realism and liberalism. But again, we did not have an in-depth discussion about those points. So just go to week number 11 to review all this material. And then in week number 12, we talked about political violence, which of course is violence with a political motivation. And we gave examples such as guerrilla warfare and terrorism, police brutality, civil war, etc., etc. That week, on the Monday of that week, I focused a lot more about terrorism. And then on the Wednesday, we spoke more in general about this idea of political violence and what make people turn to political violence. We mentioned some push factors such as grievances, frustration, exclusion, or when state institutions just seem incapable and people don't believe in the system anymore and they turn to violence. And we also mentioned some pull factors, such as this sense of adventure or wanting to be a hero, or even sometimes just plain payments that organizations use, violent organizations or organizations that want to mobilize people use in order to attract people and citizens into using or supporting political violence. We had a discussion about the specific use of women and children, and so I want you to know about that as well. And we also discussed if you are an organizer and you want to entice people to support political violence, what can you do and what tools you can use, such as social media or the general media, or pointing to people that the government doesn't help them. Finally, last week, in week 13, we talked about the environment and politics, and we mentioned things like resource shortages or access to resource. And resources here could be energy resource like natural gas and oil, but it could be water and it could be any other natural resource. And of course, we talked about global climate change, where you even watched TED Talk and had to comment on it in your final assignment for the class. And so, once again, in week 13, there's a lot more information that you should cover and you should be aware about. And so, this was just a reminder of what kind of topics we are covering in this final exam. In the Zoom meetings this week, I can answer questions and go over anything that you would like me to. But if you're starting to study for the exam, just make sure you review weeks 9 through 13 and that you have a good grasp on all of those topics that I just listed here. Of course, as always, let me know if you have any questions.